So Billy is a PhD student from London, interested in studying geomorphology, deep learning machine models, and the Anthropocene. So today he's going to talk to us about geomorphic characteristics of eroding anthropogenic coastlines. So over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, this presentation will be on geomorphic characteristics of the eroding anthropogenic coastlines and is a part of the RAC project. This presentation will display one of the preliminary results from one of our selected sites. But first, some context to this. This study has focused on a particular anthropogenic environment, landfill sites, which is where we dispose of our waste. We're specifically focused on historical landfill sites. These have been identified and defined by the Environment Agency as no pollution, prevention and control permit or waste management license currently enforced, but existed as a site in the past to dispose of our waste. These are comprised of disposed anthropogenic materials, which in landfill typology is referred to as solid waste and can be industrial, commercial, household, liquid, and hazardous waste. The solid waste can vary depending on the years of operation, and for many of these historical sites, the operation period is unknown. Furthermore, because of a lack of regulation, it is unknown what sort of solid waste was even deposited on landfill sites, as it was not a legal requirement to keep records until the Control of Pollution Act of 1974 in England. Some examples of common domestic solid waste can include batteries, food containers, electrical equipment, cleaning products, and pharmaceuticals. These materials can have a chemical and toxic risk if released into the environment and allowed to break down. For example, asbestos material, when disturbed, can release fibers, which, if inhaled by humans, can cause a variety of diseases and even lung cancer. Some of these historical landfill sites are found on the coast, and these coastal historical sites are a potential pathway for these solid waste to be released into the environment through erosion. Erosion can cause this solid waste to break down and release toxic chemicals and substances. Erosion can occur through wave energy, where waves can breach the landfill and mobilize the movement of solid waste. Coastal flooding can also trigger erosion because water can infiltrate and cause the mechanical failure of landfills through adversely affecting the structural integrity, making the solid waste physically mobilized and then can be transported. Many of these sites are found in estuaries of urban locations, creating more complex pathways for this solid waste to be transported. And furthermore, it's unclear how this solid waste may act as a sediment. To highlight the potential risk that these coastal historical landfill sites have from unknown behaviours of these solid wastes, there are at least 1,215 of them around England alone. 32% of these historical coastal landfill sites are with 100 meters of bathing water zones for humans. So humans can be exposed to the solid waste that could be a direct hazard, such as asbestos. Animals also find themselves at risk of exposure to toxic material, with 39% of OSPA's marine protected areas and 51% of Ramsar sites in the UK within 100 metres of historic coastal landfill sites. So climate change can also intensify this risk of erosion through sea level rise. In the English context, the UK CIP has predicted that the average sea level rise across the UK could be, on average, a 1.9 metre rise within the UK CIP's high greenhouse gas concentration emission scenario. Predictive erosion data was created based on the UK CIP's emission scenario and a no active management for coastal defence scenario. This was done by James Brand, who was able to identify at least 75 sites in England that would be under threat from erosion in 2025, and that there will be at least 144 sites that have the potential to release solid waste into the coastal environment by 2105 using the same data. So through this context, multiple knowledge gaps can be identified. We do not understand how this solid waste may be interacting and responding towards coastal processes such as erosion and transport. We do not know the quantities of materials being released into the environment because of lack of knowledge of what was stored and where it was stored on these sites. And this is doubly so when there are sites that we don't even know their operation period. The aim of this study is to map and characterize the solid waste material being released to the coastal environment. And this preliminary research focuses on East Tilbury Marsh, a historical coastal landfill site in Thames Estuary in the UK, which received industrial, commercial, household, liquid, and hazardous wastes between 1933 and 1991 and is currently eroding as shown here. These are two images of East Tilbury marshes. The foreshore, which has a variety of materials that has been eroded from the cliff, and the eroding cliff, where this solid waste is originating from. This erosion is mainly occurring due to coastal erosion and tidal erosion on the Thames estuary, and some of this erosion is actually anthropogenic in source, through mudlarking, a licensed activity for people to dig along the Thames coast for valuable items such as rare bottles, metals, and other items of value. This causes further disturbance and leaves areas vulnerable to further coastal erosion. This map here displays the location of East Tilbury marshes, as said before, located in the Thames estuary, and as displayed on this map, Coalhouse Fault Park is located east of the site and faces a direct pollution risk from any erosion that may occur from East Tilbury marshes. Furthermore, as it's located in the Thames estuary, this site's eroded material may spread to areas unknown within the estuary, affecting different areas such as Gravesend in the south of East Tilbury marshes. Located east of East Tilbury marshes is also an SSI site, Mucking Flats and Marshes, where the eroded material is likely to pollute the landscape, affecting the local wildlife there. Displayed on this second map, there is also a footpath that goes directly through the site and grants access to the beach in front of East Tilbury marshes. This means that people who lack the knowledge of the site might unknowingly contaminate themselves with the pollutants exposed by erosion. There are mudflats located south of East Tilbury Marsh, which is used as a feeding ground for water birds and is a potential toxic accumulation risk. So in terms of the methodology for this study that we did, there was 2 separate site visits to the site East Tilbury Marshes this year. The sampling strategy selected for Site A focused on the width of the beach, while Site B focused on the length of the beach. To determine a sampling range, a quadrat was used. A GPS was used to take down the location of each quadrat down, and the sampling scale was focused on macro material, so any items greater than 5 centimeters to 1 meter was measured within the quadrat. Any items embedded into the ground was also not measured as to not disturb the landfill and cause further erosion. Photos were taken of the quadrat pre-survey to determine the structure, which was inspired by Catherine Russell's classification framework for assessing the anthropogenic sedimentary facies. Catherine Russell plastic litter material framework was also adapted to create the categories of solid waste to identify the size, shape, and holes with the survey solid waste. Photos were taken of these items and its categories were identified. Measurements were taken of its size and then it was placed back onto the site. Later, we did photo analysis to identify other geomorphic characteristics of this survey solid waste. Lastly, we tried to find through the luster of the solid waste, the roughness of the material, and we then lastly identified which dominant material was in each quadrat to identify if there was any link between dominant solid waste and its structure. Now we move on to the results. These are some of the results that are based on the items found within all of the quadrats. We were able to catalogue a total of 203 solid waste items. Anthropogenic category is defined here as a material influenced by human activity that can otherwise be classified. And the other category was for objects that may not be anthropogenic in origin, but could have a potential anthropogenic influence. The most common material category was glass and anthropogenic material, and the least was plastic and metal. This can be due to the sections being sampled being from an earlier time period, such as the 50s, where metal and plastic were not so common as a domestic waste or as a solid waste. Here are a few examples of each categories found on site. Glass materials usually came in the forms of broken bottles and jars. Anthropogenic material included a variety, such as the ceramic pots on the right. Anthropogenic raised rock materials, such as car, displayed on the bottom and may be carcinogenic. And other unidentified anthropogenic waste material shown on the left. Concrete material that was found varied from asbestos cement material, shown in the upper image, and the more modern concrete shown below. Metallic objects included lead batteries, large rusted metal rods, and unidentified disc material. Plastic material varied from caps to wire outer layers and small fragments of unknown plastic material. And Other material included stones that did not seem to be natural to the environment, so were recorded, and animal waste products such as this bone, potentially disregarded by humans. So we used the long axis when we were measuring the size of materials, and we used that to determine to find out the mean average material size. And we found that glass size did not vary and was regularly around 5.8 centimeters. This could be due to the way that it was disposed of. Concrete and anthropogenic vary greatly in size, which in the case of anthropogenic material could be due to the large umbrella term used for many different types of anthropogenic material. Metallic material was often the biggest item found within any quadrat, and this could be due to the durability of metal material versus other materials found. As shown in this image, the long axis, intermediate axis, and short axis, in which this case the long axis is the length, the intermediate axis is the width, and the short axis is the depth. It does not always correlate, and this can create different shapes. Glass and anthropogenic material were most commonly blade-shaped, whilst plastics and metals were generally rod and disc-shaped. There was an extreme dominance of bladed material versus all other types of shapes, and a complete absence of any material that was spherical. The shape was calculated using the long, medium, and short axis, and these are some of the examples shown for rod, disc, and blade shapes. The other geomorphic characteristics did not show from the preliminary results any significance. But we did also find something quite interesting, which was throughout these results, text has been found to be visible and readable in multiple objects, which allowed us a potential opportunity to understand where this material might be sourced from and to find the density of the material out without taking the samples out of the site. And in regards to the results of each quadrat structure and their dominant material, as a whole, there was more dominant glass found in location B versus location A. Again, this could be due to how the material was organized during its operational periods of the East Tilbury Marsh landfill site, but also how glass may be transported and behave. There are no identifiable beach sorting of material in section A across the width of the beach, but was shown in section B where glass was more dominant. This may show that glass might be more influenced by geomorphic processes such as longshore drift than other materials. This is just a displayed zoom-in map of the site, their quadrat location, and the structure pattern found in each one. Density size graded material is defined here as a change in density size, while structureless means that there was no discernible structure within the quadrat. And this is just an example of our quadrat and how we were sampling. And this is specifically quadrat 14. And just shows some nice zoom-in images of what materials were found within this one. And so to summarize, materials have characteristic shapes and their potential links between anthropogenic sediment structures and material composition. Surface sampling requires significant time investments to build a representative data set. These images will be used to train machine learning models to increase data collection speed. This will allow us to map larger areas over time and track changes in waste properties over time. Further sampling is required to explore the sorting of these solid wastes. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening.